Welcome to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I am your host, Kyle King, and today we're going to be teaching you how to create an ecosystem of academic excellence. Today's topic that we're going to be discussing is starting with heart and this idea that I talk about in my newest book, Contagious Culture, creating an ecosystem of academic excellence. And when we think about any hallway, any boardroom, any classroom or community space that we walk into, there's something that you sometimes can't see, but it's often that you can feel it in every single interaction. And it's this idea of culture. It's this idea of the energy and this feeling and this mood that is sometimes contagious. It's kind of like walking to an airport and everyone is aggravated or frustrated around you. Their planes are getting canceled or delayed. And then you start to feel internally that you start getting a little aggravated. And you may have been having the most amazing day before that. But just because you're around other people, that energy is contagious and then you start to become a part of that specific environment. And when we think about this invisible thread, this invisible energy, this invisible mood that oftentimes as leaders, as educational professionals, as teachers, we don't really talk about, that's this culture that we're going to be discussing. And that's this culture and how do we shift that culture and how once we understand it, how can we transform that culture as we move forward. And if you want to build a culture that inspires, if you want to build a culture that empowers, if you want to build a culture that grows people and sustains a system, then it's important for us to be able to start with heart. So through this conversation that we're going to be able to have today, I'm going to share some stories, share some science, but then also leave you with a framework and some reflective questions that you can take back to your own profession, whether it's an organization within education or outside of education, so that you can start to assess how are we doing in this ideology of creating a contagious culture, building an ecosystem of excellence, but also how can we set a foundation of starting with heart? So when we think about this science, and in my newest book, Contagious Culture, I talk about the science of belonging. Everyone, and we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, everyone needs to feel like they belong. Belonging is, as we know, a biological need. It's something that every single human being needs to be able to feel like they belong somewhere, that they're a part of something. That's why early sports and activities and after-school programs or even school settings are so paramount and important, and should be prioritized in the early stages of development for children. And when students feel like they belong in the classroom, when students feel like they belong in the specific space, when students feel like they belong in a conversation, then learning excels. But when they don't feel like they belong, learning suffers. And one of the notes that I want to share with you, when staff members don't feel seen, valued, respected, heard, when they don't feel like their opinions are validated, morale and the vision and the beliefs, it erodes within our specific systems. But when leaders consistently commit to creating ecosystems and environments and spaces within these workplaces of safety, of respect, of integrity, of honesty, transparency, and recognition, people don't just perform, they excel and they thrive. So whether you lead a school, an organization, a startup, or a sales team, your job isn't just to have people work with you and to manage outcomes. Your job is to build this idea of belief internally. And as a former teacher, as a former dean, executive with companies, as well as a startup founder, I understand that managing priorities and managing tasks and managing outcomes is definitely important. But when we can inspire our students to believe in more than what they're producing, when we can inspire our team to believe in more than their specific job description, it allows everyone collectively to be a part of this ecosystem and be able to produce this idea of excellence. And then that belief, that idea of excellence becomes contagious, and then it starts to foster a system in our building, and it changes the energy, it transforms the environment, and then also shifts the mood in more of a positive format towards what we want to be able to create for our educational institution or for our organization that we're wanting to serve. And when we think about anything's an investment. We have our cost and our benefit analysis. So when we think about the cost of culture without starting with heart. Here's the truth: if you don't intentionally shape your culture, if you don't intentionally um, prioritize this energy and this mood, then the culture shapes itself within an organization. And it might be something that you're proud of, and it might not be something that you're proud of. But I've visited schools all over the country, all over the world. And I've seen the shiny mission statements and the values and the pictures posted on the wall. But it also creates a feeling where teachers feel unsupported and students feel unseen and parents feel disconnected and leaders are disengaged and people aren't committed to the specific mission statement. And when we think about all of these things, all of those are cost. Turnover rises, burnout is spreads, innovation dies, truth and trust disappears. But when they center the heart with leadership, everything shifts around them. And when you look at any great organization, the Googles, the Microsoft, some of the best organizations out there, like Amazon, trust is in existence. Innovation is a part of the organization's DNA. Burnout is decreasing because mental health and balance and that work-life balance is accepted and appreciated. And then turnover is one of those things that is decreasing as well. So when we think of starting with heart in real life, you don't need a massive budget. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need any of these major things. You need intention, you need consistency, and you need an ability to be able to say, hey, we're going to commit to this work. And no matter what roadblocks come up, no matter what challenges or hurdles that we have to deal with, we're going to be committed because we're keeping our students, our constituents, our teams, and the people that we serve in mind. So when we think about 5 steps that I want you to write down. So take a moment, pause the episode, but write these 5 steps down. Number one is you have to be able to lead with empathy. And I read a study years ago when I was in college that said the top CEOs in the country are people that don't necessarily empathize and lack empathy. I believe we're growing in an era where empathy is probably one of the most important things when we're wanting to hire, when we're wanting to promote, and when we're wanting to work under a specific leader. It's one of those things that I believe is lost. But simply asking questions, how are you doing? And actually caring about the response. Simply asking questions, what is one thing you would need, or what's one thing that you would want to make your day better, and actually implementing something to be able to ensure that person receives that. Or even a question simply where it's, hey, how was your weekend, and what is something that made you smile? Like when we're beginning to listen with care, it becomes a superpower that separates and differentiates us from not just other leaders, not just other people, but other organizations. And when we can begin to foster that amongst peers, then that is adopted and becomes contagious. And then we can adopt that into our classrooms. And then classroom students then start to ask each other that and actually care about the response. I was watching something on Netflix a few weekends ago, and it was based in the UK. And somebody asked the young man when he came in, hey, how are you doing? And the young man just looked at the person, and his mom told him, hey, in America, usually people say, hey, how are you doing? And I just want you to respond next time, I'm fine or I'm good. And he said, I thought you told me, mom, not to talk to strangers. And then she responded to him and said, son, in America, they just ask that and don't really care about the response. So you just give them a response out of respect and to keep moving. And as true as that statement was, that we really ask that question and don't really take a time to rest in accepting the response, it's disappointing. So I want you to be different and actually care about the response that you're getting from people by leading with empathy first. Number two, I want you to celebrate effort, not just outcomes. And I grew up in a household where outcomes and measurables and results were rewarded, and you got the sticker on the wall or the reward or the dinner or the toy or whatever the case may be. And in schools, we award students. We reward students for good behavior. We reward them for all of these various things and these targets. But when we can recognize resilience and persistence and improvement, then the culture ultimately grows because people feel appreciated along the way, not just at the finish line. And I think that's important in education, where we're focusing on mastery, when we're focusing on growth standards, and really being able to celebrate these students' growth, not just celebrating the results that they're trying to achieve. So next time, I want you to think through, like, hey, how are you seeing a team member grow? How are you seeing a student grow? How are you seeing one of your constituents? Or what are you seeing that is improving or becoming more resilient or persisting through? And I want you to recognize someone in that process. Okay. All right. Let's move to number 3. So number 3 is creating rituals of connection. Every morning, one of the things that I've adopted is actually having an intentional conversation with a loved one before the day starts, whether that is a spouse, whether that's a child, whether that's God, whatever that needs to be. But you need to create rituals of connections, whether it's morning huddles in the morning, weekly gratitude circles, one-on-one meetings, book studies. Just, you want to be able to focus on building relationships intentionally, because those relationships will be the breadcrumbs to the destination that you're trying to take, not only your teams, not only your students, but ultimately your overall organization as well. So in order for us to build and start with heart, yes, it's important to lead with empathy. Yes, it's important to celebrate effort, not just, success or managing outcomes. It's also important for us to create those rituals of connection where we foster an environment where building relationships are actually a priority. All right, number 4, model vulnerability. I think this is the most important step. And I think it's one of the most challenging steps as well, because, you want your team to see not only that you make mistakes, but you want your team to see you as being an actual human being. If you need to take a few steps back, if you need to take a few days off, if you need to be able to ask your team, hey, how are you balancing this specific project or these specific set of priorities with your marriage or your children? Hey, if you need to take a day to shut down, then you need to be able to prioritize being honest. If you're burnt out, it's going to show up. If you're needing some time, it's going to show up. So you want to be able to admit mistakes. You want to be able to share lessons in order to be able to build trust and minimize fear. You want to be able to get to a point where your vulnerability is the velocity that drives the organization forward as well. And I see this all the time within my work, where we mask what's actually going on in our lives, or we mask the challenges that we may be experiencing in our personal lives as well. But that can't be your story anymore, because when you begin to be vulnerable, your students will begin to be vulnerable. Your teams and your peers will begin to be vulnerable as well. And it's such a beautiful experience when we're sharing collectively these lessons, these stories, and we're building and fostering relationships so that we understand how to first support the person before we can support the process that ultimately allows us to move the specific organization forward, in a sense. And then number 5, which is super important as well, is ultimately make people feel seen. So number 1, lead with empathy. Number 2 is celebrate effort, not just outcomes. Number 3 is to create rituals of connection. Number 4 is to model vulnerability. And then number 5, which is also important, is to make people feel seen. Whether it's a handwritten note, whether it's a shout out on a staff meeting, whether it's some form of remembrance of a birthday or something special, I want you to ask yourself every single week, how and what have I done where each individual team member feels like they're appreciated and that they're seen and valued within this specific organization. And when we get to a point where we're implementing those small things, it creates a bigger impact that will serve as a ripple that can transform not only our day-to-day interactions with our team members or our peers, but ultimately the overall success, the overall culture, the overall energy and the mood within our organization. So like I said earlier, when I was introducing our topics for today, I want to be able to leave you with some reflective questions. So as you consider your own culture, as you consider whether you're in education, business, or beyond, I want you to ask yourself just a few questions. Okay. Number one is, what does it feel like to be a part of my team or to be a part of this team? And I want you to really sit and write these things down. And when I took myself through this activity first, the vulnerability had to come out, because I think before we can move a needle forward, we have to be honest on where we are. So again, that first question is, what does it feel like to be a part of my team? Number two, how often do I actually check in on my people's emotional well-being, mental stability, and not just their performance? So how often do I check on people's emotional well-being and mental stability and not just their performance? And I think so often we look at targets, we look at results, we look at data, and we look at numbers rather than looking at people's heart and understanding who they are as an individual and what they may be going through, and how what they're going through may be impacting the other things that they're experiencing within their lives as well. Number three, when someone walks into my school or my organization or my office, what energy greets them? This is one of the things that I had to realize. And I think in either chapter 3 or chapter 4 of my book, I talk about culture is not just what happens in the building. I define culture as kind of the full experience. Once someone pulls into the driveway, is there signage in the parking lot? Is there a long wait time before they actually get into the building? Once they get into the building, what is the energy immediately that they're greeted with? How long are they sitting down before their appointment is taken? Once they're walking with their appointment, the person that's greeting them, how is that experience? All of those things, are there follow-ups that happen after the meeting is over? So when we think about all of these steps, what does that look like? So when someone walks into my school or my organization or my office, what energy greets them? Okay. Then number 4, what are we celebrating and what are we tolerating? That's the reality. I think a lot of times we're celebrating things that we should not be tolerating. Are we celebrating honesty? Are we celebrating vulnerability? Are we celebrating integrity? Are we celebrating excellence? Are we tolerating things that we shouldn't be tolerating? Are we tolerating gossip where we should be throwing that in the trash? Are we tolerating inefficiency where we should be throwing that in the trash? And I feel like the more things that you celebrate, it then shows people what's the priority of the organization or the priority of the school. And then they're forced or shifted or transitioned to get in line so that they are able to achieve or contribute to what's important to that organization as well. So what are we celebrating and what are we tolerating? All right. And the last question, is our culture contagious for the right reasons? I've worked in schools all over. I've visited, this book is a lot of research with various schools that I've visited around the country. And one of the things of the reality of it is there's a lot of inefficiency. There's a lot of negativity. There's a lot of skating by. And in education alone, excellence is not the standard. And as disappointing as that is, I think that you set the tone in all that you do. Leadership is a mirror. You are the mirror for your specific students as well. So what your team sees in you, they will reflect. What your students see in you, they will reflect. And when you lead with integrity, they will produce integrity. When you lead with empathy and courage and a sense of fearlessness, they will also mirror that sense of fearlessness. So we have to begin to build cultures that aren't just productive. We have to build cultures that are powerful. We can't just build teams that just execute. We have to build teams that elevate each other. And we have to just not create spaces that are just focused on surviving and getting to the next day. We have to focus on creating spaces that are focused on thriving and empowering systems and empowering students collectively as well. And it begins with starting with heart. I know this is a lot of information packed in 20 minutes, but I wanted to keep these short and sweet and powerful so that you can be able to have the keys, have the understanding, but then also have the time where you can be able to implement this. I appreciate you for staying this long with us. Again, I want you to like, subscribe, and comment under this episode. What are some of the questions that you're having in regards to culture? What are some of the questions that you're having in regards to organizational or educational success? Because we want to be able to help you. We want to help you create a contagious culture, one. And then we want to be able to help you build the foundation to creating an ecosystem of academic excellence where everyone thrives, where everyone elevates, where everyone has this sense of power internally. You are on another episode on the Contagious Culture podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and we're so excited to see you next episode.